Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Was not met. The judge set bond and granted it without an ankle monitor, which in the context of a serious criminal case is a meaningful signal about how the court currently views the strength of the evidence, specifically as it pertains to Arnold individually compared to the other defendants in this case. Listening to that hearing in full, including the defense attorney's argument that there is no hard evidence, no text messages, no phone data placing Arnold at the scene, and that another individual appears to have been the one orchestrating what actually happened, creates a genuinely different impression than the one that has dominated headlines since this story first broke. The reasonable and honest reaction to hearing all of that is to start wondering whether Arnold may have been telling the truth all along when he reportedly went to Dan Campbell and the organization and said he was not involved. And then, just hours later, the Detroit Lions released him anyway. That sequence of events is what makes this situation genuinely confusing rather than straightforward. And it deserves to be acknowledged honestly rather than smoothed over with a simple culture narrative. If the legal evidence specifically distinguishing Arnold from the other defendants is as weak as the judge's own statements suggest, then releasing him immediately after that hearing, rather than waiting to see how the legal process actually unfolds, raises real questions about what actually drove this decision. The most charitable interpretation, the one that aligns with everything we know about how Brad Holmes has built this organization, is that this reflects a genuine zero-tolerance culture where any level of association with this kind of situation, regardless of the ultimate legal outcome, is simply unacceptable for someone wearing a Detroit Lions uniform. Under that framework, even minimal proximity to a case this serious is enough to end the relationship, full stop, no further deliberation required, regardless of what a judge ultimately determines about guilt or innocence months or years down the road. But there is a less charitable and equally plausible interpretation worth considering honestly, that this release had less to do with pure organizational principle and more to do with the Lions using a complicated and uncomfortable situation as convenient cover to move on from a player whose on-field performance and trajectory had not lived up to the draft investment and expectations that came with selecting him. Arnold has been, at best, a debatable number 2 cornerback on a secondary that has struggled significantly, and the honest comparison drawn here is worth sitting with. Would the Detroit Lions have made this same swift and decisive move if this situation involved Jared Goff or Amon-Ra St. Brown, or any player whose performance was unambiguously elite and whose absence would create a genuine and immediate competitive crisis? The honest answer, based on how the NFL and professional sports organizations have historically operated, is probably not. Star players across professional sports have historically received more patience, more benefit of the doubt, and more institutional protection through complicated personal and legal situations than role players have, and there is a reasonable argument that what we are witnessing here reflects that broader pattern as much as it reflects pure organizational principle. The financial dimension of this decision deserves honest examination too, because the savings from releasing a player on a rookie contract are genuinely modest in the broader context of an NFL salary cap, which undercuts any theory that this was primarily a cap management decision. This was not about the money. Whatever the Lions saved by releasing Arnold rather than continuing to pay him is not the kind of figure that meaningfully reshapes this roster's financial flexibility, which means the decision has to be understood primarily through the lens of organizational message sending rather than practical roster construction necessity. The practical competitive cost of this decision is real and should not be minimized. The Detroit Lions secondary, already a position group that generated legitimate concern heading into this season, just got thinner at exactly the moment training camp is approaching. Whether the eventual solution comes through a trade for a player like Denzel Ward, free agency additions like a veteran such as Darius Slay, or internal development from younger players stepping into larger roles, the Lions are now navigating a cornerback room with one fewer experienced option than they had even a week ago, and that gap needs to be addressed before the regular season begins. The human dimension of this story deserves acknowledgement as well, because regardless of where you land on the organizational decision, Terrion Arnold is a 23-year-old whose life and career trajectory have been fundamentally altered by this situation, and the consequences extend well beyond just this season or this football team. The reality the broader NFL landscape often demonstrates is that situations like this follow players throughout their careers, creating hesitancy from future organizations regardless of eventual legal outcomes and potentially limiting Arnold to short-term, prove-it contracts rather than the kind of long-term security that comes with the trust teams extend to players they fully believe in. Whether he is ultimately found innocent or guilty, this is going to be a defining and complicated chapter of his professional story for years to come. What we genuinely do not know, and what may never be fully clear to anyone outside the organization, is exactly what conversations took place between Arnold and the Lions front office throughout this process. What specific information or impressions led to the timing of this release, and whether the organization would handle this differently if the legal process ultimately and definitively clears him of any wrongdoing. The question of whether the Lions jumped the gun, releasing a player before the legal process that the judge's own ruling today suggests may ultimately exonerate him had fully played out, is a completely legitimate question that deserves genuine debate rather than a predetermined answer in either direction. This is a genuinely complicated story without a clean resolution, and the responsible thing for Lions fans to do right now is sit with that complexity rather than forcing it into a simple narrative about culture and accountability, or a simple narrative about an organization abandoning a possibly innocent young player under pressure. Both elements appear to be present in what unfolded today, and the truth likely lives somewhere in the uncomfortable space between them. Drop your honest take in the comments on whether the Lions jumped the gun given what came out in court today. Tell us whether you think this decision was genuinely about culture or whether performance played a larger role than the organization is publicly acknowledging, and let us know who you want the Lions pursuing to address this now thinner secondary. Smash that like button, subscribe if you have not already, and we will be back later with another show. Lions Nation, peace.